Hello everybody, welcome back to Reaper Minis TV, and this episode is going to start the first part of our first Warlord battle report for Reaper Minis TV, and over the next couple of episodes we'll get through an entire battle report from beginning to end. To start off with, what we'll do is introduce the two armies that we're playing with today. These are going to be 500-point armies, so they're a good starting point to learn and play the game. Most tournaments you'll see at the 1,000-point level, so expect about twice as many of these figures on the board if you were playing these two factions, but the number of figures in an army, in a 1,000-point army, can vary wildly. You can have as few as 10 miniatures in a really high-powered elite army, or I've seen army lists that are about 100 figures if you're playing a horde-style army. So, here we go with our two armies. First we've got a Revan army, and leading the army is going to be Gronk Split Eye. He's a bugbear, and he's a captain. He's going to be leading 4 bugbear warriors, and then we've got Kagunk, an ogre, who's going to be leading 3 ogre warriors. And the last thing we're going to have in the army is an orc shaman, but I'm going to be using a bugbear shaman miniature in his place just because I think it fits in the look of the army that I'm putting on the table today here. But it's going to be using Greca, the shaman stats from the Revan list. Now I've got a couple of points left over in this particular list, so we're going to give Gronk Split Eye a book of tactics. I really don't know what a book of tactics would look like for a bugbear. It might just be a blank tablet and a big chief pencil where he draws his plans, but anyway, that's going to get us to 499 points out of 500 for the Revan list. Since I don't have a Warlord in this army, I don't get a benefit for having a Warlord, go figure, but I do get to pick one of the two faction doctrines, and I'm going to go with the Tomuk doctrine, and this gives me two things. It gives me a tenacious ability, and that means that any of the Revan models that have the tough special ability that are killed because of defensive strikes. So that'll be if they attack somebody and the defender hits back with a defensive strike and kills them, they get to make a re-roll on their tough roll to see if they're actually killed or not. And then we also have the Enrage ability, and that allows each activation, a single model in whatever troop I'm activating can choose to become enraged. So they get all freaked out, and that's going to give them some extra abilities and benefits in hand-to-hand combat, and we'll get to that when we get to that. Now over on the Razig side, we have Mr. Blood leading things, and he's got 5 skeletal crewmen with him. We have Crow's Nest Willie in the second troop, and he is accompanied by 3 Bone Marines. There's a Soul Cannon as troop number 3, and another Soul Cannon as troop number 4. So very much a shooty type army here, as opposed to the hand-to-hand army on the other side of the table. Like the Revan army, there's no Warlord in the Razig army for this build-out, so no Warlord benefit, but we do get a faction doctrine, and we're going to take the Walk the Plank doctrine for the Razig army, and this does 2 things. The first thing is that models that have the slow fire special ability, which are going to be a decent portion of the army, can choose to do slow fire as a single action instead of a dual action. Normally slow fire means it takes both actions to fire the weapon, but if you choose to use the broadside ability, then the entire troop or none of them does it as a single action, and if you do that, it only causes a single point of damage instead of 2 points of damage, but it does give you the option to aim when you're going to use a slow fire weapon. But no matter what, slow fire weapons can't be used for defensive shots, even if you're using the broadside ability. And the second thing that you get with Walk the Plank is a thing called Headshot. And what that means is models with the slow fire ability, if they use both of their actions to shoot, so you can't use it in conjunction with broadside, but if you use both actions and do a normal slow fire and you kill somebody that has the tough special ability, they get a -2 penalty to their tough roll. So it's going to help put down, hopefully, some of the tough models on the other side of the board. Alright, and as a last little bit of housekeeping before we get started, our draw deck is going to be composed of the following colors. The Razig army are going to be red cards, and the Revan army are going to be black cards, and I won't necessarily show you the drawing of the cards here, but you'll know if Razig's going, that means we drew a red card. If the Revan army is getting the next activation, then it's a black card that was drawn. For terrain setup, you can see that the table's already set up, and if you want a tutorial on setting up terrain, just go back and take a look at Reaper Minis TV episode 10, and you'll see that there. Okay, so on to deployment now. And the first thing we've got is one of the soul cannons we're going to put up on the hill here because Razig drew the first card. And the second deployment card was also for Razig, so we were just going to put the second soul cannon up there to get a good field of fire. Then we've got the bugbears on the on the Revan side that are set up in a forest. Then we've got Crow's Nest Willie and his mates over on a little hill over here. Next up we've got Mr. Blood and the skeletal crewman over between the soul cannon and Crow's Nest Willie. And then we've got the ogres back behind a little bit of a hill and over by the bugbears. And the last thing that's going to come out is going to be our shaman, and it's going to be a bugbear shaman like we talked about earlier. And here you can see just sort of a quick flyby of the battlefield before we get started and get into turn 1. You can see the Revan army over here on the right hand side, and then we'll pan over and you can see the Razig guys over on the left hand side, and then here's just sort of a look at the whole battlefield itself, and then we'll get started. Okay, and away we go with turn 1, and it's going to start off with the ogres going first, and they're going to do a move-run combination here. Now they normally have a move of 7, and when they run, their second action is going to get some extra movement there, so they're really going to get a 16-inch move off of the run, so we'll go ahead and take care of them. We've got the one guy coming around the boulders here, the big rocks and vegetation, trying to scout around. And if you remember in Warlord, you don't have any kind of unit coherency that you have to comply with. Now, generally it helps to keep guys together just because you activate them together and they're going to get to shoot at people together or beat people down together or things like that, but you don't have to. So we've got the bulk of the ogres, and we're just going to slide them all up here because we know about how far they're going to get to go. Slide these guys up around the rocks here. And then here's just kind of a zoomed in look at where the ogres ended up before we move on to our next activation. And then the next activation for turn 1 is going to be the bugbears, and they're going to do a move-run combination just like the ogres did, so we'll get them moved up here and then get on to the third activation for the turn. And then the third activation for turn 1 is going to be Crow's Nest Willie and the Bone Marines. They're going to take a shot at that lead ogre who's sort of behind the rocks there, and here you can see a zoomed in version of the firing line that's going to be shooting at him. Now he's going to have cover, so they'll have a -2 on their shots. The entire troop is going to use the broadside ability, so what they're going to do is they're going to focus and then shoot at the ogre that's in cover there. And what we end up with are rolls of 4, 8, 10, and then 9 for Crow's Nest Willie. So we'll take a look here and I'll show you how all those shots work out to hits and misses. Every one of them gets a +1 because they're focused. Every one of them also gets a -2 because of the cover of the ogre. And then the Bone Marines have a ranged attack value of 4. Crow's Nest Willie has a 5. So that means we end up with final results of a 7, an 11, a 13, and a 13. The ogre has a defensive value of 11, so we have 3 hits here, 3 wounding hits, and normally that's enough to kill a model that has 3 damage tracks like the ogre has, but he has the tough ability, and he would normally get to roll a d10, and if he gets a 10 or better, you add 2, because his tough ability is 2 to the roll. So really, if he gets an 8, 9, or 10, he would be alive with just his last damage track left to him. But Crow's Nest Willie has the sniper ability, and what that means is if he's involved in any kind of shooting action that results in the death of a model that has the tough ability, they don't get to use it. So basically, the other guys pepper him, and Crow's Nest Willie finishes him off with a headshot or something like that. Our next 3 activations are all going to go pretty quickly here. They all end up being Razig actions. The first one will be one of the soul cannons moving over to get a better line of sight so we can fire in the next turn, hopefully, on the oncoming Razig guys. The next action is also going to be the next soul cannon moving over to do the same thing. And then the 6th action for the current turn is going to be Mr. Blood and the crewmen that are with him just going to spread out and shift over and move to get into what are hopefully going to end up being better positions for them. And then the last activation for the turn is going to be our Bugbear Shaman. And you can see him over here. He's kind of dragging behind everybody right now. And what he's going to do is he's going to cast a spell. He is going to cast Burst of Speed, and we're going to try to do that on the Bugbears. Now we're using that D12 to keep track of his spell points. He has 12, and once he uses them all up, they're gone. And Burst of Speed has an 18-inch range, so we make sure that he's in range, and we roll to cast it. He's successful in casting it, and what that results in is that all friendly models that are within a 3-inch area of effect of where the spell was pinpointed can immediately take a free move action as a free action. So it's got the potential to catch more than one troop in the burst itself, so you're going to see the movement that we're getting as the free action from the Burst of Speed. And then to round out the first turn of the game, you can see where everybody ended up here. We've got the results of our Burst of Speed with a good number of the ogres and bugbears surging up towards the Razig firing line, and we'll see how that plays out in turn 2.